Hello everyone, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. So let me introduce myself. My name is Siti Maula and I'm the student of English Education Department of Wali Songo Islamic State University Semarang. And especially I'm on the sixth semester. So today I want to discuss an article entitled Management of Divergent Stances as a resource to maintain progressivity and social relationship. So this article is published by Logren and colleagues in 2024, and this article is very relevant to my previous topic about sociopragmatic, especially in the chapter stance and evaluation, because it shows how people manage disagreement, authority, and emotion in real life interaction. So what I find interesting is this article proves that communication isn't only about exchanging information, but also about how we can maintain relationship while different opinions appear. So in this presentation, I will explain how this article connects to the concept of stance and evaluation. But before we discuss further, I want to briefly explain the theoretical foundation. So, definitions of stance based on the Cambridge Handbook of Sociopragmatics. So, in sociopragmatics, stance is reversed to how speakers position themselves towards something. It can show knowledge, opinion, certainty, authority, or emotional attitude. For example, when someone says, I think this is correct, or I don't agree with that, they are taking a stance. So, in the important ideas then is socially and interactionally constructed. It helps speaker to show agreement or disagreement, certainty or uncertainty, authority, emotional position, and social alignment. And then the next one, definition of evaluation. So, what is evaluation? Meanwhile, evaluation is closely related because it refers to how the speakers assess something. So, people can evaluate an idea as useful, dangerous, important, or irrelevant. So, evaluation often appears through opinion, judgment, reassurance, criticism, or emotional farming. So, for example, the treatment is effective. It might be positive evaluation, and then that might be risky. It can be negative evaluation. So, the relationship between stance and evaluation in sociopragmatic, stance and evaluation often happen together. So, what makes this concept important in sociopragmatic is that language doesn't only transfer meaning, but also build relationship, show alignments, and sometimes even create tension. That's why this article has a strong example of stance works in real interaction. And in sociopragmatics, it's very related to stance and evaluation. They explain how people position themselves socially, how language express interpersonal meaning, how authority and emotion are negotiated, how alignment and disalignment occur, and how relationships are maintained through interaction. So these concepts are important because communication isn't only about linguistic but also social. And then we will analyze the article. So from the background of the story, moving to the article itself, the study focused on about doctor and also patients communication. So at first, this might look like a normal medical consultation, but if we look deeper, this article is actually a negotiation of knowledge, authority, and emotion. So in medical interaction, doctor and patient often have different perspective. Is it right? And patient may bring concern, assumptions, or prior experience, while doctor, on the other hand, have a professional knowledge and institutional authority. So naturally, different stains may appear. And the main issue here that discussed in the article is how can a disagreement happen without damaging communication. So how do speaker manage disagreement while maintaining communication and social relationship? That's become the core discussion of this article. And then purpose of the study. So the researcher actually want to understand how participants manage divergent stances. So in simple terms, They want to see how people continue interaction even when they do not fully agree. So what I think is important here is that the study does not disagreement as a communication failure. Instead, disagreement is analyzed as part of social interaction. So the focus isn't why the conflicts happen, but how interactions continues despite different position. And that perspective is very socio-pragmatics. So this is the researcher focus on. And next is the research methodology, sorry, I mean. So, this study used conversational analysis and multimodal analysis. And what makes this interesting is the researchers didn't only analyze the words, but they also examined the gesture, facial expression, and then body language or body movement, pauses, timing, and also turn taking. So, this is very important because communication is rarely only verbal. So, sometimes a short pause, facial expression or a gesture can show stands more clearly than the word itself. So the article gives a broader understanding of interaction. And then concept of stance in the article. So according to the article, stance refers to participant orientation toward knowledge, authority, emotion. Stance is dynamic and negotiable. Participants may shift or modify their stance during interaction to maintain communication. And the key idea is stance is interactionally managed. So a key contribution of this article is the explanation of stance through three dimensions. These are three axes of stance. The first is epistemic stance, which relates to knowledge and certainty. And then this means how participants position themselves toward what they know. And the second one is deontic stance, which is connected to authority and decision making. And in this case, doctors naturally have stronger deontic authority because they decide treatment. And the third is affective stance, which refers to feelings and emotional alignment. For example, showing empathy or concern. What I find interesting is that these three stances can happen at the same time in one conversation. So interaction is actually layered and complex. So the article showed that these three stances may occur simultaneously. The next is divergent stances. So one of the central concept is divergent stances. So it happens when participants hold different position toward the same issue. In the article, the patient is concerned that penicillin allergy might be relevant. However, the doctor believes the medicine belongs to another medical group. So there is a difference in knowledge. So this creates epistemic disalignment. But this doesn't automatically become conflict. Instead, it becomes interactional negotiation. This is a very strong point in the study. So this create epistemic disalignment, partial deontic tension, and also interactional negotiation. And then a management of disagreement. So what I really like from this article is how disagreement is managed. So the doctor doesn't directly reject the patient. Instead, she balance explanation, authority, and empathy. First, she clarifies medically. Second, she maintains professional authority. And the third one, she acknowledges the patient's concern. So, disagreement is softened because it shows that communication can stay cooperative even during disalignment. So that's where social pragmatics become very visible in social communication. And then role of evaluation. Now is the strongest connection to evaluation. Actually, evaluation in this article isn't always obvious. Sometimes it appears through explanation, framing, or reassurance. For example, when the doctor explained that the medicine belonged to a completely different group, she is not just giving information, but she also evaluating the relevance of patient's concern. At the same time, she reduced anxiety, so evaluation functions socially, not only linguistically. That was one of the most interesting insight for me. So in the article, the example is this medicine belongs to a completely different group. This acts as evaluation and reassurance. And then talking about alignment and disalignment, another major finding is that communication doesn't need total agreement. So people can disagree in one aspect but still align in another aspect. For example, the doctors correct the patient's knowledge. So epistemically there is disalignment, right? But emotionally she still understands the patient's concern. So that creates affective alignment. And this spiritual alignment help maintain social relationships. So interaction isn't black and white. It can be both aligned and disaligned at the same times. Yeah, and this create partial alignment. And then multimodal management of sense. So this article also emphasizes multimodal communication. We know that STEM is expressed not only through speech, but also through nonverbal behavior. Gesture, gaze, posture, timing, and emphasis all help shape meaning. And this tells us that STEM is embodied. It is not only verbal positioning. So that expand our understanding of communication in real life setting. And this strengthen emotional and relational meaning. And then the main findings. So overall, the study shows several important things. First, I just want to conclude it in a simple way. First, divergent stances are not always negative. And then the second one, disagreement can actually support communication. Third, emotional alignment can reduce tension. And finally, stance management help maintain both progressivity and relationship. From a socio-pragmatic perspective, this is very important because it shows that communication depends on context, power, empathy, and interactional negotiation. So, stance is not simply just an opinion, but it's also part of social meaning. And this is the relevancy to socio-pragmatics. So this article is strongly related to social pragmatic because it shows language reflects social negotiation, authority and empathy can coexist, disagreement can be productive, interaction is dynamic, meaning depends on context and relationship, and this proves that STEM isn't only linguistic but also relational and pragmatic. Alright, and then finally we come to the conclusion. So to conclude, this article showed that stance and evaluation are important in understanding human interaction because people continuously negotiate knowledge, authority, and emotion. Even disagreement can become predictive when managed carefully. For me, this article strongly proves that language isn't only about saying something, but it also about we are positioning, interpreting, negotiating, and preserving relationship. And that's why this study is highly relevant to social pragmatic. Okay, maybe that's all from my presentation. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. I hope this presentation helped us understand how stance and evaluation work not only in the theory but also in real social interaction. Maybe that's all from me. Thank you for your nice attention and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.